Good evening and welcome to tonight's edition of The Probe. Tonight is not about how dark your political lens is. It's not about whether you are an illiterate or educated with more degrees than, let's say, a thermometer. The show tonight has got very little to do with your faith or how agnostic you are, because this matter affects all of us, regardless of your social status, ethnicity, or the unbridled nature of your political stance. Never before in recorded history has the cost of things soared this high in Ghana, at least in the recent history. People have described this situation in different ways depending on the depth of your vocabulary. Some have simply suggested that we are in a crisis of the high cost of living that bites in spite of how much you earn. In fact, how much you earn now does not matter. This is especially why tonight's show is limitless in scope and focus. It's a conversation for everyone who has ever bought anything. After all, he who buys it knows the cost of living. Tonight, we also speak about the ailing Ghanaian economy and our dramatic U-turn to go back to the IMF after we swore never to. The Information Minister, Kojo Oppong Nkrumah, is here with answers. We're live on the JoyNews channel. We're on Joy 99.7 FM, myjoyonline.com. DSTV channel is 421. GoTV is 144. We're live on all social media platforms as well. Stay connected, especially with your questions and comments. I am Emefa Apawu, and this is The Probe. A quick turnaround, then we get talking. When you come to stock, the next time you're back, the prices have like doubled or something. Like there's an increase. There's always an increase. Like every time there's an increase, and it's not even funny. Oh, I used to buy like the afternoon. A bottle was, I think, 11 or 12 cedis. A baby food, you can correct me if I'm wrong. And then now it's about 23 or 25, right? So you can just imagine. Oh, in a week, close to 1,000.
I came the other day and the price was like, the land was like 37 cents. But when I came today, he said it's 45 cents. Yeah.
5 cedis, you get wache and gari. And we managed to give you macaroni small.
Last month I increased 5% for their salary, 5%. I don't know why. If you didn't increase the salary, they will run away. So the profit that we get, we used to pay for the workers, so that if you didn't get anything to pay, when I get small to pay my electricity and blah, 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 that's all. I am sacrificing my profits for my workers.
We buy it 7 cedis, but now it's around 15 cedis, 10 cedis, and no upwards. Formerly, I buy like 4 or 5, but now I reduce it to 2 or 1.
Now it's our time for us. We have to start working, because any day, any time, the fuel price is going up. And right now, we don't know what to do now. So we have to start packing our cars and start working. Where I stay, I buy 400 Ghana cedi a week. 400 Ghana cedi a week.
Like filling the tank?
It will not even fill the tank. It's half tank. 200 cedi. I will buy it on Monday. Then somewhere Thursday, I have to buy another 200 Ghana cedi. First, it wasn't like that. First, I will fill my tank with 130 Ghana cedi, 134 Ghana cedi.
Any salon I enter, either 10 or 12 cedis. So I opted for a roadside barber who charged 7 cedis. I have stopped going to the tailor because they also charge too high.
Next week, Kramova, monthly 48. Akagbamovan, 90 cedis.
So she's trying to say last week when she came, Oba was 45 cedis, right? But today it's 90 cedis, which means the price is very high. She said since the price is high, she can't buy it.
They say 2 cedis na matter her. One cedi say cry na manyana. Masa,
look at Kose. I got the leftovers because I couldn't afford 2 cedis. The economic conditions are very harsh for some of us. We need the government to do something.
I don't actually eat in the morning. I fast And then in the afternoon, I can spend 9 cedis on good food. And then when I get back home, yeah, my wife is able to prepare something with the 50 cedis I give for the housekeeping.
16 cedis times 5. Even a month is more than 300 cedis. So just imagine, as a student, a part-time student, all the income that I get, I have to spend it on all my fares, without even getting something to even put in my pocket or something better. And that is really disturbing. At this point, I was even contemplating whether I should mix some of the lectures for studies for some job, or whether to go all the week, because I can't go through all the week.
Because they say no, one am proud of going among Koyi, and Koyi said to say I had to pay more, but yeah, you 5 cedis, and I'll look up every my year. Now it's a madam and I'm here to say.
I was sorry, I say, price first and I am going to say, yeah, the center you know what you can. I say, I say,
Tigana yatina kasa nyangu bona ya hwene nim sisi because mpinfo no ma ya madwun say nya de am bebo Ghana fo because enyama ekoso no nka bibisa no a fe say no aka say badista yentum mira ayedin say enteni bia mu kasa mu boye no mu abeda mu boye.
So the general sentiment, I mean, with people that we interacted with on the cost of living, well, it's been over a period. My colleague, Mamisi Nyamiche Thompson, has been championing that, series for us, is the Living Standard series that we've been running for some time now, months now, and they've been telling us the standard of living according to how they feel it in their pocket and in their situation. A number of people will join us via Zoom, and I must once again welcome the Information Minister. He's with us in the studio, kind enough to be with us there tonight. We are grateful for your time. This is about the second time we are interacting this whole year.
I think so.
Yeah, good to see you. Well, we'll come to you shortly, but let's just hear a few Ghanaians who want to have their say tonight on the probe, on the general standard of living, the cost of living. I'll start with my colleague, Mamisi Nyamiche Thompson. Well, she's been interacting with people, so we get a general sense, a number of people he's been interacting with, the kinds of work they do, amongst others, and what they've been telling her. Mamisi, if you can hear me, really, give us a sense of understanding on the kinds of people that you've been interacting with and exactly what they've been telling you. We've heard some of them, but the general sentiment, what has it been?
So Emefa, when I go out, the target is usually the ordinary Ghanaian, the bread and butter issues. It cuts across though. So I've spoken to bakers, as you saw in the video. I've spoken to market women. I've spoken to everyday people. I've spoken to students. I've spoken to laborers. I mean, name them. I've also spoken to housewives, mothers, sisters, aunties, all of them, and people who are living in areas like Agbogbloshie, people who live in areas like Medina, La Paz, relatively cheaper areas that you think will be much easier to live at, and also high-end areas like East Legon, Airport Hills, and the rest. But then you hear that the sentiments are almost the same, just that it's in various stages, or if I say in various levels. So, but then the thing that runs through is that times are hard. Prices have soared, and people are spending more than they usually do than previously. So that is the song. But one thing too I got from the people I speak to is that a sense of apathy has set in. People no longer feel they are being heard. And so they're going through what they're going through, but then are finding ways to survive because they feel that there's no form of salvation anywhere. And so that is the essence of what I'm getting when I go on the streets every day. They are hoping that somebody would at least listen. There have been times I've gone out on the street and people call you and tell you, Madam, Naumbana Yakasabi, hey, Joy FM for Mumbra Yapasi Yakasa. When you get close to them, they just want to be heard. They just want to know whether somebody feels what they feel. Somebody is listening to what they are going through. So that is really the general sentiments going on when you go out on the streets, Emefa.
Okay, that's my colleague, Mamisi Nyameche Thompson. The Living Standard series is on every Tuesday and Thursday. You can catch it on the various JoyNews channels and also Joy FM. Thank you very much, Mamisi. I'll let you go because we want to do this as quickly as possible and get a number of views. Then we can interact with the Information Minister on the cost of living as well as our return to the IMF. I've been joined on Zoom also by Julius Kuku Anthony. He is a national service personnel. Also on Zoom, Emmanuel Abuajia Sare. He'll be joining us. I also have a teacher, Mohammed Zakaria is a teacher, Pong Tamale Experimental JHS. I have a pastor as well, Deacon Dennis Asumini. And then also I have Bonzi Kuku Forcing. He's an electronics dealer. Thank you very much for your time, gentlemen, also for joining us. So maybe I'll start with Eric Techi, NAPCO trainees. We've been hearing you cry out for some time now. What's really your situation as we speak? Briefly, you can tell us what's your standard of living and what you'd say to the Information Minister. Hello, Eric. You have to unmute if you can hear me. I'll move on to Deacon Asumini. Well, I've been hearing stories about people no longer paying their tithes. What's the situation in church? You have to unmute, sir. Hello, Deacon Asumini. Well, I hope our telephone line or Zoom line is not being affected by the standard of living. But let me try Dr. Kwabena Otu. He's with the TUC. And just today, you know, before our decision to go back to the IMF, they had indicated to government that they will vehemently oppose a decision to do that because they've been asking for COLA amongst others. Well, thankfully, he joins us also via Zoom. Dr. Kwabena Otu, we are grateful for your time here on the probe. Well, I've seen a statement from your outfit on this. I was hoping to save it for the last. I would have to come to you on this. What really is your concern?
Thank you for having us. Our concern is simple, that we do not think that in as much as we are in a problem, in a crisis, we do not think that the IMF offers a solution to the myriad of problems that we face in this country. We have been there 17 times, and this is where it still ended. So going there again is like doing the same things and expecting different results. We think that that shouldn't be the route we should take at this point in time.
But hearing that now we are engaging, what then do you have to say to government on this? Because in spite of the concerns that you've raised, it appears that it's on the table.
So for us, it's unfortunate. We think it's a tragic mistake on the part of government to unilaterally decide to engage the IMF, especially when since 2019 we have had a social partnership arrangement with government with very clear objectives in terms of our engagement as social partners. For us to be slapped with this decision without any consultation whatsoever from government, for us it's unfortunate, it's tragic, and we think that in itself signals the end of the social partnership arrangement. And it clearly then tells us that at this point in time, we need to do everything we can to secure the interests of the Ghanaian worker and to ensure that on the 18th time, IMF programming does not impose unnecessary, needless hardship on Ghanaians and the working people of Ghana.
What's really the fear of the TUC, you'd say?
Come again?
What's really the fear of the TUC?
We know IMF programs. One, they do not offer any lasting, durable solutions to the country's problems. They will scratch on the edges of the problem. The fundamental problems of the economy will remain after 3-4 years of implementing. Second, they will immediately impose hardship. So we saw that in the last IMF Extended Credit Facility program, government could not employ into the public sector. Wages were frozen at their rare levels. And we think that this time, workers are already struggling too much, and it will be too much to ask them to sacrifice again. So our fear is that IMF programs, as we have always known them, will impose needless hardships on Ghanaians, and in the end, deliver nothing substantial. by way of improving our economic circumstances.
Point strongly made. We'll leave you. We are grateful. That's Dr. Kwabnotu from the TUC. Their concerns about government return to the IMF. Julius, I don't know if Julius is back with us. Julius Kwame Anthony. Oh, forgive me, I don't know the faces. I'll have to identify by the name. So if you're with me, Julius, you're a national service personnel. You've raised concerns about the Alawa. You say it's inadequate. But what really is the situation with you in terms of your standard of living? Are you there with me?
Yeah, I'm here with you. You see, the issue of national service personnel is the situation where they have been given, peanuts for allowance, and then allowance was intended to cover, the cost of our transportation and some basic needs in the course of serving the country. But it has been woefully inadequate. 559 in the midst of this economic condition, transportation fares always going up and all that. And we did not even come to the aspect of food, because even at the household level, it's a problem. Our parents themselves cannot even survive on their salaries and all. So going back to them to even ask for their intervention for our food and all those basic issues becomes like, just recycling so many problems at the same time. And I'm glad that the information minister is there. One thing that is very painful about this situation is the fact that you complain about your standard of living. You are feeling it. You know it. Then persons outside of those conditions tell you that conditions are good, or tell you that conditions are worse at other places, so you shouldn't complain. It's one of the things that, service personnel, young people all over the country take very strong reservations to. We are having issues. As a country, the best way to go about it is for every person who is concerned to actually try to identify with the issues we are having. You need not necessarily be a national service personnel or be feeling like, directly feeling the kind of things we are feeling, but you could at least relate if you think about how much we are getting and the cost of things in the country. You could at least relate by knowing that we are really suffering, but we don't see that on the side of government or the people who are supposed to care about these things. Then more importantly too, in 2017, there was a recommendation from the Fair Wages and Salaries Commission and the Ministry of Labour and Employment, which says that national service allowance should be pegged at 40% of the graduate entry level for public sector workers. And that recommendation was implemented for the first time in 2017. And since 2017 till now, there has been no adjustment. It is very impossible for anyone to tell me that here in Ghana, graduate entry-level pay has remained constant from 2017 to today. It is not true that it has remained constant. So it is a very, very bad situation for us. And with the IMF perspective and all these things coming in, it makes things rather worse. Because at the time where we were demanding better conditions for national service personnel and all that, things were not this bad. Okay. So imagine the situation we are in now, asking for increment in this time. It almost seems impossible for government to do the way I see it. Okay. And then beyond all this, when IMF conditionalities are imposed, if the erstwhile John Mahama administration time is anything to go by, the people who are affected most are people within categories like us, national service personnel, fresh out of graduate, fresh out of college students who will be needing employment. Government has been unable to deliver on its ambitions to expand the private sector to employ people. I don't see a lot of private sector opportunities. Okay. Then those who will be hoping to get space in the public sector, there are chances that the IMF would place conditions that, would actually have to even take some people out of job. We'll get to know from the information minister if that will happen. Julius, we'll get to know shortly. I'll get answers for you on this. I'm grateful. But let me bring in Mohammed Zakaria. He's a teacher at the Pong Tamale Experimental SHS. I'm grateful for your time also joining us via Zoom. Tell us about the situation of the ordinary teacher.
All right. So thank you so much, Emefa, and good evening to our cherished viewers and to my co-panelists. First of all, I want to contextualize the issue, having to talk about the percentage increment in public sector salaries vis-a-vis prices of goods and services, and how we are able to manage. Now, in 2021, public sector workers were given a paltry 4% increment in salaries. In 2022, it's 7%. Now, at times you even wonder how we are able to, manage, and at times you look at the prices of goods and services. Now, let's take petrol, for instance. Now, at the beginning of the year, in January 2022, a liter of petrol was going for 6 cedis, 30 pesos. Today, as we speak, it's hovering around 11 cedis, 41 pesos. This is almost 100% increment in the prices of petroleum products. And as a teacher, I need to buy fuel to commute to school on a daily basis to teach my pupils. And this is the way I can contribute, towards the development of the country. And is this the way I should be motivated to work? At times, you even look at our conditions and you feel that it's not worthy, serving the country. Permit me to say this, but at times it's just so appalling if you look at our conditions. Now, I want to respectfully appeal to Honorable Kojo Oppong Nkrumah that it is high time our leaders in this country put their ears on the ground to listen to the plights of the people.
Okay.
Times, Emefa, are really hard. Things are difficult. And you take the conditions of people who work in the public sector, especially the teacher, and you just say that, wow, where are we heading to as a nation?
Okay, we're grateful. Let's bring in Pastor Asmini. I think I have a clearer line to him now. Also, what's the situation in church? Are people paying the tithe? Is the offering coming?
I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Okay, the situation isn't good at all. It has affected attendance. Because looking at our church, most of our members don't live close by. They have to pick trotro from wherever they are and come to church. And looking at the economic situation, when prices of goods and services, transportation, and everything is going up daily, on a daily basis, that is a sad aspect. On a daily basis, members can't come to church. How can they serve God when things are so difficult for them? It's sad. You see, people can't give offering as they will or as they want to. People cannot pay tithes very well like they used to. And it has even affected the mood because people are not willing again. So I will appeal to the government that, as my brother said, they should listen to us. It's not good at all.
But how can living conditions be affecting the love for God?
For instance, if you cannot attend church services, and you know what Hebrews 10:25 says, it says we should not forsake the assembly of the saints, okay? So that is one. So if people cannot come to church, their presence or their fellowship is being affected.
Okay.
So this is how members are affected. And as I said, in Accra, most of us don't live close to our churches. And you know that. People travel. And if they always have to pay trotro and transportation keeps going up on a daily basis, you pay trotro and people begin to fight. Why? Because it's always going up. And the passenger fights with the maid with the passenger. We know this. So I will appeal, to the government that it's not a case to be a citizen of this country. But we are now being treated as if we are like second-class or third-class citizens of this country. And it's sad. It has even made some of us annoyed being a citizen of this country. I mean, what is this? Most of us are not happy. This is a good forum. We don't want to use words that are unsavory. So we would like to limit what we say. But it's sad. It's like a curse being a Ghanaian. Let's compare our economy to Togo, to Burkina Faso, and to Mali. The resources that we have in Ghana, we can, Togo and, Benin, Mali, Burkina, they can't compare to Ghana. We are the best among all the countries I've mentioned. Okay. So if we have all these, and yet we need to suffer worse economic conditions than those people are suffering, then it's sad.
Okay.
It's worse than being like a citizen of maybe Niger or Mauritania. I mean...
Thank you so much for voicing out your concerns on the probe tonight. We truly appreciate it. And you've been hearing from a number of people via Zoom. We've heard from the TUC. We've heard from the National Service personnel, a pastor. We've heard from a teacher, amongst others. And we truly appreciate it. Along the line, definitely we may return to you again to join us with your conditions and what you think so far. I've seen a number of your questions also. Maybe finally, I'm told that we have somebody on the phone, just finally, so that we take that and then we get into the conversation. Mr. Forsing, I'm told he's an electronics dealer. What's the situation with you? Hello, Mr. Forsing?
Yeah, please, are you talking?
Mr. Bonzi, I'm told it's Mr. Bonzi. Forgive me, Mr. Bonzi.
A pastor, not an electronic dealer.
Okay.
Just a quick
We have two pastors tonight. Great. Tell us, what's the situation?
Yes, thank you, Emefa. I'm so grateful that you have me on. And I think as a pastor, I will side with Pastor Ismeni because he made mention of DNP making it difficult for our members to actually come to church, which is very true because the transportation cost alone, when members look at that, because most of them are not close to the churches, so when they look at the cost, the return fare alone, plus their offering, then time, it makes it a disincentive for them to actually go to church.
Okay.
And so the attendance has actually dropped. So the churches are actually arranging buses to transport their members to church, which has also increased the cost of operation of the churches and is making things a bit difficult. I think the goods and services he talked about is very true because, our members previously will come to church, rejoicing, being excited about business, testifying about progress in their lives. But
even the testimonies are not coming.
Yes, we don't actually get them to testify like seriously because things are quite hard for them. And when they come to church, you see on their faces that things are quite hard. And when they come for counseling, you get to hear of so many challenges, school fees that have gone up, cost of transportation, fuel, and it makes it difficult for them to actually make the profit that helps them also support the church.
Okay.
Then also, you look at the profit they make. The profits now go into other things instead of them using the profit to improve their lives. It's like they spend the profit indirectly, not on themselves, but it goes into kind of, I heard somebody say, oh, I've increased the salary of my workers, is it 5%? So now it's not the member enjoying the fruit of his or her labor, but it's actually the people he or she is doing business with that are taking the money. So they are just kind of working.
Okay.
And they are not making much for themselves.
Pastor Bonzi, we are grateful.
Yes.
We thank you so much for joining us tonight. We'll make way for answers and then also the key questions that you have. We'll put it to the Information Minister now. It's 34 minutes past the hour of 8. You're listening to The Probe if you're live on Joy 99.7 FM. We are live on the Joy News channel, also on all social media platforms. Many thanks for joining us with your views about the general standard of living, the high rising costs most of you have said, even affecting your Christianity and your religion as well. But thankfully, the Information Minister is with us in the studio. Once again, it's been quite a week
yes.
for you.
The past week has been a tough one.
Has it?
Yes, and the coming one will probably even be tougher.
You're expecting that?
Yes, because we're in tough times.
What kind of general reactions have you got from the public since the announcement on Friday?
It's a mix. Depending on who you are speaking to, the sentiments are different. For those who are very familiar with all the intricacies of an economy, some of them have a certain sense of understanding of why this decision has been necessitated. There are some who understand but disagree with it. For those who want to be political, they have their sentiments. For party people, there are a good number of party people who themselves are not necessarily pleased with the decision that has been made and announced. So it's a mix.
Okay.
And then on the broader economy side, as I listen to, my brothers and sisters speak about the general economic hardships in the broader Ghanaian economy, first, I think what we have to say to you out there is that we feel your pain. We are all feeling the pinch of what is going on around the world and affecting us here. And I can very much identify with the things that, for example, Julius. Is Julius the National Service guy?
Yes.
That Julius talks about. National Service person earns about 559 cedis. And if fuel prices go the way they are going, all of that is eaten up by transportation at a time when even the National Service allowance sometimes may be a bit delayed. There are people who are looking for jobs and are hoping that the public sector will open up some more beyond what it has done already so that they can get jobs, and it's not coming as fast as they want it. And so you can feel the pain. At the same time, when you go to the market, cost of cooking oil is gone up. Everything, rice, everything. But there's a reason for which all of these things are happening. Today, if you take, for example, the report of the Ghana Statistical Service, it says that food prices are going up primarily because transport fares have gone up. And transport fares have gone up because fuel prices have gone up and have been going up. Why have fuel prices gone up? In December last year, a barrel of crude oil was $74. As at the end of March, it's $133. That's almost doubled. If you are not in a country where, for example, there are a lot of reserves that the government can then say it is using to subsidize, then it means that, especially if you're in a very deregulated market, in a market where private companies go and buy the crude oil, ship it in, host it in tanks and bring it to their own private fuel station, Emefa station or Poku station or something station, then they are going to pass on that cost to you. Once that cost goes up, transport is also deregulated, transport fares will go up. So when the woman goes to Downgrade to buy a box of tomatoes and now has to transport it at these high prices to Accra and brings it to the market, understandably the price will go up.
But there are certain taxes that government could take off fuel, for instance, that would make it easier for us.
I'll come to that. But the point is that what is therefore happening is the product of a global crisis. I was just reading up some data this morning. In the US, things have gone up unlike they have done before in the last 40 years, a 40-year high in inflation. In the UK, another 40-year high in inflation. In parts of Europe, like Norway, about a 13-year high. So I think the first thing is to understand that, oh my gosh, there's a global challenge that is hitting us all. Then you come to your second question, so what is my government doing? And if you'll recall, let me give a bit of a history. Between 2017 and 2019, the Ghanaian economy still had its own challenges, but it started performing better than what it had done previously. It was growing at a faster rate. More people were getting jobs. Things like inflation had started coming down from about 15% down to about 7%. At the time, when you mention it, people say, it's just numbers. You notice that today, when that inflationary anchor has slipped and prices are going up, now a lot of people are beginning to see how valuable that reduction from 15% to 7%. Inflation came down, interest rates came down. Then we started building a lot more buffers and reserves to hold the Ghanaian economy. Then in 2020, we are all aware, that's when I used to come on your show. And those days when I come, I'll be in a mask and you'll be in a mask. And after every 30 minutes or so, they'll come and spray alcohol on the table. Why? COVID. Your colleagues were not coming to work fully. People were doing shifts. COVID and all of those lockdown we're talking about, even just for a month, slowed down the Ghanaian economy, the West African economy, the global economy. When the economy slows down, what it means is that, because, for example, government only makes money from economic activity. So people, you would do your work, get your pay, and then a bit of it will be deducted into the government treasury. I will do my job, end of month, a bit of it will be deducted. Multimedia will work, end of year, 25% will be deducted. That's how government gets money. When the economy shuts down, it means that government is not going to get money. When government is not getting revenues, in the US, for example, government says, then I can't pay all my government workers, so I'll furlough them. So in the US, they furloughed government workers. In Ghana, we said, no, let every government worker continue to earn. Let's do free this, let's do free that. Let's ensure that we protect lives first and then livelihoods. By the time you finished in 2020 and got into 2021, the first part of your economy, which is the fiscal framework, had been badly hemorrhaged. So now literally all the reserves and buffers you have built are gone. You've used them to deal with the COVID program. Schools, students are going, masks, all of the kind of things that you're spraying here, you're doing all sorts of things. Now by 2021, you started rebuilding. So you notice that 2021, the economy started growing again, 5.4. You started getting in some more money because the economy was growing. You were attracting some more resources from abroad. So you were expecting that by 2022, you can grow some more. Entering 2022, two things have happened. Our own economic program that we put on the table, which was supposed to help us grow or build back better, has struggled. And I'll explain why it struggled.
You're talking about the e-levy?
Not just the e-levy. E-levy, other revenue measures, even borrowings and our reserves. All of those have struggled. And I'll come to explain that in detail. But at the same time that your economic program, which was supposed to help you build back better, is struggling, you've now been hit by another global crisis, the war in Europe, which is bringing three things. High food prices. A lot of the colleagues who were speaking about, imported tin of this, imported that of that, and yesterday I came and the price is here and it's gone here. The high food prices on the world market are beginning to bite them. So high food prices, high fuel prices, $74 to $133 in a deregulated market will hit you. And then high cost of financing because of the sanctions that Europe is imposing and Russia is reacting to high cost of financing. What does it mean? Now what is happening is that while your domestic economic program is challenged, there's an international crisis that is hitting you. And everybody is asking, what is government doing to help?
It's not just hitting Ghana.
It's hitting many other countries in the world. And all governments are asking, what can I do to respond? Now, in Ghana, for example, take fuel. I hear a lot of people who say, why can't government subsidize fuel? Emefa, the reality is that there is no money there to subsidize fuel. Indeed, rather, the reverse is that government has some taxes, and I'm coming to answer your question. Government has some taxes and levies and some margins that were on fuel products. In February, when the war started and the economists predicted we were going to have problems, government came out, and I recall coming out and speaking and saying that we're going to introduce some measures on the instructions of the president to help mitigate the situation. So we took away about 3 margins. Yes, we didn't touch the taxes, but 3 margins. UPPF margin, fuel marking margin, BOST margin, we reduced them in our bid to mitigate the situation. We said we'll engage better with transport companies to see how they also don't escalate because it will further, escalate in that regime. And the last 3 months, in the last 1 week, we've been assessing how all of these measures have fared. And we've come to a firm view that the impact of the global crisis is so severe that some of the measures we have introduced, though they have worked, are not able to stop the impact on the Ghanaian.
Then what made us so sure, at least just this week, you were on a sister station, you're so sure about what the interventions we had put in place such that we didn't need to go to the IMF. As we're going into this IMF conversation, there are those who say that even before you explain away our going back to the IMF, it appears that government owes Ghanaians an apology, at least to start with, even before you explain to us why you're going back. Don't you think we deserve an apology?
So it's not correct that I've been so sure. I have been so sure. 2 things have happened. I have said throughout this past week that government is assessing the numbers. And that if by the time we are done assessing the numbers, we have to take some decisions before the halfway review, we will take
at least the minister in charge.
The minister in charge of finance has been very articulate in saying that we have domestic solutions to the challenges. But the president has ultimate responsibility. The president has heard his minister. He has heard other fiscal policy analysts. He's listened to other economists, etc., and has come to the view that while you have introduced your domestic measures, which are yet to hit optimal level, I am instructing you to start engaging the fund, because if I look at the full breadth of the numbers as I have them, and in particular, the reserves and the buffers that have been depleted because of the interventions we rolled out in 2020, I think the prudent decision is to engage the fund to get some sort of balance of payment support, which will help us deal with some parts of the bigger Ghanaian economic question. There are parts of the bigger Ghanaian economic question that you will not need the fund to resolve. I heard Dr. Otu, for example, mention that the TUC is not happy because they don't believe that the IMF will solve the bigger Ghanaian economic question. He's right, the IMF will not solve the bigger Ghanaian economic question. The IMF is here, and that's why in the letter we wrote and the statement we issued, we were clear, to help us on balance of payment, which will ensure that, in particular, our foreign exchange reserves, our CD, our external debt obligations, and then some liquidity for the fiscal are provided. But there are many other questions that we as Ghanaians will have to answer with domestic resource mobilization. There are many other areas that we have to work on deeper with private sector, third-party countries to deliver, so that we can better mitigate the impact of this global crisis on my brothers and colleagues who are calling in this evening and explaining to us how all of this is affecting them. So, I mean, we feel your pain. We are in this together. The first set of measures have only delivered limited results because of the sheer enormity of the global crisis. Just this morning, I was reading another article, I think from about 2020. And from 2020 till now, the IMF, for example, says that about half of the world's countries from 2020 coming are asking them for some support. So it's a difficult time globally and locally, and we are mopping up all the support we can get so that we can better alleviate the plight on the everyday Ghanaian.
And the apology, are we getting it as Ghanaians?
I don't think it's a matter of apology or not apology. I think it's a matter of being confronted with a certain set of scenarios and choosing the best options that can help you deal with the current situation.
If the man in charge of your economic affairs, the finance minister, assures us countless times that there is no need to go back to the IMF. Yeah. Is it the case that the president was ill-informed, the whole government was ill-informed by the finance minister?
I handle policy for the information sector. If I say categorically, for example, that in the new broadcasting bill that we are working on, there will not be X or there will not be Y, and I finish, in the structures of government, I will go to cabinet and it will be put before the entire cabinet, which is an advisory body to the president. And the president and cabinet and the president and his other advisors will look at all that I'm saying, and he has every right, every power, because he's the one we voted for, to say, I hear you, but I disagree with this position, minister. This is the decision that we're going to go by. And we line up and we execute that decision. And I don't think there's any harm in that scenario.
Is it a little too late for government to take this particular decision? And while at it, they are concerned about the economic and the social costs of this, so to speak, indecision on the part of government, because we could have done this earlier than we're doing now.
Let me respond to the first part of it. I think this is the appropriate time that you will take a decision like this. Let's go back. 2017, 2018, 2019. There was no basis to take a decision to go to the fund for a balance of payment supported program.
But the same COVID you are raising, it came up in 2020.
I'm saying 2017, 2018, 2019, there was no such need. 2020, as I've explained, our economy was badly hit. 2021, we actually took money from the fund. I hope people have not forgotten. We actually took about $1 billion from the fund to support our COVID response program. But that was not a balance of payment program. Now, as we're entering 2022, in November 2021, we put an economic program before the Republic, went to Parliament and sought to get that program approved, and then upon its approval, implemented. Take some of our revenue measures. Where ordinarily you would expect revenue measures to pass, let's say in November, December, so that by the 1st of January, implementation starts, and then you can build the revenues and the buffers that you are looking to deal with, for example, my brother's national service allowance, or the cost of living allowance, as my colleagues are asking for. It has taken about 4 months before you get one revenue measure pushed through. 137, yes, we understand, but there are things that sometimes we do, and sometimes we are of the view that it is politics, but they have implications. It's taken 4 months to get that revenue measure pushed through. Take, for example, apart from that revenue measure, the need to ensure that we have a window to be able to attract international reserves from the international capital markets. We end up doing some things that lead to a downgrade. If you read the downgrade of the Ghanaian economy by the international ratings agencies. It is there. One of the reasons includes how we have handled ourselves in Parliament. So now we are downgraded. You are downgraded, you can't access the international capital markets. So that even if your internal revenue measures were delaying, you could access some money from the international capital markets without going to the fund. So now you have a downgrade on that front. In fact, as at now, we have $1 billion from the international capital markets in Parliament awaiting passage so that we can shore up the currency. And again, you are already beginning to get signs of we will not let this pass. That will lead to a further deterioration of the scenario. So what I'm saying to you is that there's a combination of factors that is making our situation a bit more difficult to manage. We need to rally together and address them on various fronts. One, dealing with the fund on this BOP support, which is only a limited window of support for a particular purpose. Two, domestic resource mobilization, ensuring that we're able to move from this about 12% of GDP that we are contributing so that my brother can get his allowance, cost of living, government can better respond to the economic crisis that we are facing.
So as it stands now, we've not been able to quantify the economic cost. But going to the IMF.
If I just may land.
Okay.
Three, the broader economic challenges that also require a deeper collaboration with industry and other private sector players who have some capital to find more space to operate. And as they operate and there's more productivity, we get back into the national kitty.
Okay, so I don't know if you're able to quantify, because I haven't heard you give me in terms of what the economic cost actually is for us as a country, and is the IMF able to secure that cost for us as we go to them?
So you ask yourself, what do you need to show up your buffers, for example, in the central bank? You're looking somewhere around about $3 billion. Okay. And already you recall that the finance minister initially indicated that there were arrangements to get about $2 billion, up to about $2 billion, out of which there's $1 billion now available. Parliament has to approve for us to receive so that the cedi does not depreciate further, so that we have a shore up of our reserves to be able to meet liquidity and debt servicing obligations, even as our domestic measures will get better. And then you are hoping to get about another outstanding $1 billion from elsewhere. You have the window to start talking to the fund to see. Today I saw a document that says that looking at Ghana's quota and our macroeconomic data, we could get anything, maybe around $2 billion to help shore up what we are looking for. But we must understand that there's no single bullet to the challenges we are dealing with. Okay. And so we need to rally around and draw from various sources, as I've mentioned, capital markets, the fund, domestic resource mobilization, which is in the end, because even when you borrow, you're going to have to service it with domestic resource mobilization. And the earlier we confront that, the better, as well as the other challenges.
Okay, I'll get into the questions, but whilst we talk about the other issues, at least the economic, programs that you say we've put in place, at least you went to Parliament on, especially the e-levy. With its failure, at least admittedly, it's failed. You were hoping that you get some amount of money from it. You did not get it. What happens to it? Will it be scrapped?
When you introduce a revenue measure, it takes a while for it to hit its optimal levels. Take VAT.
Then why not wait?
Well, but while you are waiting, my brother who has challenges with his national service allowance, I'm not sure, Emefa, you will tell him to wait. I'm not sure you will tell our colleagues from TUC to wait. I'm not sure you will tell our school feeding caterers who have not been paid to wait. You cannot wait when people are going through pain and difficulty like this. A responsible government will have to, while you are allowing the revenue measure to pick up and plug the loopholes, you have to take other measures that ensure that you can shore it up. That's why we've done two things. We've got $1 billion at the doorsteps of Parliament, and we're asking Parliament to approve it so that we can bring it in and take care of our obligations so that people's pain will be reduced. And then we've started engagement with the fund, looking for BOP support to show up currency, show up liquidity, so that the pain will not be more. We can, support our people some more. And then at the same time, we are plugging the loopholes in some of the revenue measures that we designed and expected would deliver for us, so that it will churn out and deliver better. I've heard people say the tax measure was not well structured. If it wasn't well structured, let's look at it and structure it well. But at the end of the day, we have to mobilize some more domestic resources to respond, and we cannot wait.
Okay. Well, we knew that we could not wait, but we made such a big fuss about it that this is the almighty e-levy. Be it and end it all to all the problems that this country is facing. At least that's the impression we're giving as a country.
No, that was a narrative some people spun on it. Why did this become such a matter? It became such a matter because there was a lot of objection to it. And so you had to keep explaining. And in explaining, you would explain what it can possibly help us do. And then sometimes people spin it out that, you know, it's like Akobami, it can solve every problem and all. But those are things that happen in politics. So even those ones are not difficult. But it was one of the major revenue measures. Don't also forget that we've got the property rates program, which is also being rolled out to ensure that we can get more from property rates to be able to show up. We've got the VAT compliance program to ensure that we're able to get more from VAT. We've also got the bill in Parliament on exemptions to cut out how many or how much exemptions we are given so that we get some more resources into the national kitty. So it's not as though e-levy is solution to everything. It is one of a number of measures. I know sometimes because of politics and all, we like to reduce things.
But going to IMF, will it be the solution to everything?
I've said already that it cannot be. The IMF is only being invited to help us deal with balance of payment issues, which will help shore up the currency, provide liquidity for, in particular, international debt obligations, provide some more liquidity for the general fiscal program. We can respond to some of the things that my colleagues are asking about and help us to, in the short term, deal with some of the pain. But there's a broader need. For example, we need to work better with industry to enable industry improve its productivity, exports, and the return of exports into our national reserves so that balance of trade itself will improve. Any country that doesn't export more than it imports, you will be in a situation where when you're importing more than you export, your currency will always be under pressure. What does it take to better support industry to do this? It takes resources. So how do we mobilize more resources to assist industry to produce and export more, and not just produce and export more, but ensure that the returns of that export comes back into, our balance of payments so that we have enough forex, help the currency, help liquidity, help deal with the, some of the fiscal constraints that come up every now and then.
I'll be saying goodbye to our radio audience shortly to make way for a walk with Jesus. But issues about our debt sustainability, for instance, that's coming because we know that the IMF gives to countries that have sustainable debt, and it doesn't look like we have it as we speak. You can tell me otherwise. But announcing that we are going to the fund is different from actually getting it. We know some countries who have been there for some time now, they still do not have access to it. What time frame are we envisaging that will happen?
I mean, on the average, it will take about 6 months. I think the last thing took about 7 months. The last ECF took about 7 months. We think that, yes, average about 6 months, but we would work towards shortening it a little bit. What a lot of people are afraid about are the potential conditionalities. And I heard, I think again it was Julius, speak about his worry about the potential conditionalities. It's the same reason for which we have been saying forever that you should try and do things on your own and not get into a scenario where you have to go there. In our situation, we are clear on the things that have compelled us to go there. In particular, the second bout of crisis that has hit us. But yes, we have to negotiate with the fund in such a way that the things that are most critical to Ghanaians are protected. The things that are most important to Ghanaians are protected.
We'll get into those because we've heard the TUC raise concerns, employment. We've heard Julius and the rest of them also raise it. But just before we say bye-bye to our radio audience, they want to know if IMF also fails, what happens?
Well, as I've said, the IMF is not a single bullet to the things we are dealing with. You're going to the IMF for balance of payment support. You've already got $1 billion at the doorstep of Parliament.
Why not shelve that
and
look at the other options that you say you have?
In one basket.
We knew that before we put all our eggs in the e-levy basket.
We didn't. I've told you that we had e-levy, we had property rates, we've got the exemptions bill being dealt with, we've got a whole strategy on debt management or debt sustainability, debt reprofiling and re-strategy. So I think that narrative itself has to be corrected. Sometimes people spin it out of politics, but that's not the truth.
So Ghana is Ghana broke?
Well, I have explained to you that we are getting... I want
a straight answer to that, then we can say bye-bye to...
I'm giving you a straight answer. I've told you that we are getting to a point where our reserves are not in a good position. And what that means is that we have to quickly ensure that while the domestic revenues are picking up, we're able to get some more forex into our reserves. And that's why we've already got a tap.
How far away from being broke are we?
I haven't said we are broke or we are getting broke. I've said that we have $1 billion at the doorsteps of Parliament. I think part of our conversation must also look to how do we get Parliament to approve that which it must approve, so that that comes in, you get a bit from the fund, you get domestic resources coming in. We can't close all the inflows and fold our hands and say we expect something to happen. That is not possible. We have to let all of these channels work for us.
Okay. For our radio audience, unfortunately, I would have to say goodbye to you, but the conversation continues on the JoyNews channel. We're also on all social media platforms. A Walk with Jesus takes over with Pastor Atuakwa. But it's a good time to get into your questions now, a number of them that you've sent in. But just before we get into it, the issues about sustainability, our debt sustainability as a country. We know that is one big condition for the IMF. Do we have a plan in place? What really are we doing to make us sustainable such that we can have access to the fund since we are going?
Yeah, debt sustainability is one of the things that remains a conversation in this country. The reason for which debt sustainability remains a conversation in this country is that traditionally domestic resources are low. And when you have borrowed, especially in foreign currency, and the real sector is not producing and exporting more, so balance of trade and balance of payment is challenged, the foreign currency debt begins to increase in cedi terms, even when you've not added to it. I think I've been at pains to try and make this argument over and over again. And every time you need to produce and tax and find more cedis to go and pay your dollar obligations. To cure this, you need to raise more domestic resources. There's no way to deal with debt sustainability if you are not raising more domestic resources. So you need to raise more domestic resources so that, for example, the portion of total resources that you use to service debt comes down. I was listening to my brother Felix Kwachofoso on Saturday, and he was making a point that in the first 3 months of this year, total tax revenue is almost equal to total debt servicing. But that is because, yes, debt has gone up. And if you look at our numbers, debt went up in the last 1 year very, very significantly, particularly because of the response program that we were introducing. But as that has gone up, if you do not increase domestic resources, literally what will happen is that all your resources, or maybe even more than all your resources, will now be needed to pay debt. So debt sustainability, you can do some financial engineering by reprofiling the debt in the short term. So I owe $1 billion and it must be paid next month. I can take somebody's $1 billion and pay next month, but the new $1 billion I took will now be restructured to be paid over 3 years. Therefore, the month-by-month debt servicing has gone down. You can do that one, but your $1 billion has not gone away. The way to improve that one is to ensure that you produce more, raise more revenue, and use that to very quickly, one, reduce your reliance on debt, and two, service your debt obligations as quickly.
Do we have time to do that?
We will have to find time. We will have to rally around the red, gold, green and understand that it's not about MPP and NDC. It's about us collectively seeing the finances of our country and deciding that we are going to commit to raise more money to be able to deal with the obligations on us, restructure the debt that we have, and even if today we have to take a facility from somebody to deal with the temporary pressures, be able to pay back and satisfy that while dealing with the broader economic questions in the Ghanaian economy.
Okay, let's get into the questions so we don't leave our audience out of this because there are questions I'm seeing also about why we are posting these economic indicators when economies like Togo, amongst others, our neighbors, aren't are not doing that bad. But this one, KOF, it says there are about 9 IMF programs, each with their own conditionalities. Yeah. Which one is Ghana going in for?
Okay.
Emmanuel says the last time Ghana signed onto an IMF program, we were a low-income country. Now we've achieved middle-income status. Will this influence the kind of program we may qualify for? Latif says experts say IMF programs have just a 3-year benefit, then the economy is back in crisis. What's the assurance that this very program, if approved, will be different? I'll take a final one on this so that we can get detailed answers. Lamti says the weight of government's flagship programs on the 2022 expenditure list is over 9.0 billion. Will the decision to go to the IMF affect any of these programs? So let's start with, okay, let's add Lamisi's question. IMF programs usually come with tightening of public sector employment. Are we ready as a country to go 2 or 3 years without employment in the public sector? That's Lamisi's question for this batch. And so should we start with the bit about which program exactly we are going for?
First, what you do is that you have an assessment team that comes in to look at all the macroeconomic and macro-fiscal data. And based on that one, they will be in a good place to recommend what type of program is best. Is there a standby arrangement that we are going for? Is there an extended credit facility? There are several of them. But it's the data. It's like when you go to a hospital, it's your blood test that tells what kind of treatment that you require. So the data that we share with the assessment team is what will guide in making a determination of what program. But we are clear that whatever program it is, it must go to support balance of payment, because usually that's what the fund.
Do we have a clear program exactly that we put together already?
First of all, we have all the data. We also have the enhanced economic program, which has a component on dealing with the fiscal framework, dealing with monetary policy, dealing with the real sector. It's only the monetary and fiscals that we are talking to the fund about, as I've mentioned over. But we have a clear, bigger program. But whatever instrument they will give us to deal with the monetary and fiscal issues will be based on the data we share with them. Middle income may not necessarily affect what type of program we finally sign up to with the fund. Middle income rather usually affects the kind of general borrowing from capital markets or other countries that you do. So middle income may not necessarily affect the kind of program that we get. There's a question about back in crisis after 3 years.
Yes.
That is when you structure a program that does not do anything beyond dealing with your monetary and fiscal issues. If all that you're going to do is to deal with your monetary and fiscal challenges that you have in the short term, then you deal with it. And if you don't deal with the bigger structural challenges in the Ghanaian economy, like I've said, how do you deepen engagement with industry to really produce more, export more, bring in the bucks and have it reserved in our central banks and other banks, and have it also impact the fiscals, claw from it instead of 12%, maybe 20% into the fiscal so that you can spend and deliver on it. If you don't deal with the bigger issues, then of course you just do a 3-year balance of payment program. They will finish, you get stability, they are gone, and then you are back to square one. And that is what we have to avoid by dealing with a bigger program now. There's a question about flagship programs, and I want to add
2022 expenditure also, and then a flagship.
Yes, and I want to add that to the tightening of public sector employment. You are yet to go into the negotiations. Now is the first stage later this week when they are in town, when we start going through the numbers and signing off and taking that all of these numbers are what they have been over the period. And then you now start a negotiation that determines what sort of quote-unquote conditionalities. I think what we can do is to look back to the last 2 times the MPP administration negotiated with the fund. The last 2 times we negotiated, in 2019 or somewhere in 2018, when we negotiated a 1-year extension of the ECF. At that time, we had rolled out a number of social protection programs, or what you call flagship programs. And there was that debate of, are we going to lose those programs in lieu of that 1-year extension? I think we succeeded in showcasing the kind of growth that was happening in the economy, for which reason we should be allowed to keep our flagship programs, and so we kept them. Then just last year, 2021, when we went for a 1 billion facility, it did not end up being a BOP facility with conditionalities attached. We were able to state quite clearly the fact that, listen, the economy was doing well until we were hit by the first crisis. We've used up our buffers to deal with it. We are now trying to rebuild these buffers. We are confident that these programs are translating into growth and incomes for the Republic, and therefore we don't need to sacrifice them. So if we look to the evidence of the last 2, I think we can be optimistic that we'll do our best to get the best deal for the people of Ghana.
And there are concerns about this global situation that's just hitting Ghana in the middle of its neighbors.
Yeah.
How is it that they are not recording such bad figures as we claim that we are recording?
I was telling your colleague at Asempa FM that you've always got to go into the details. First of all, if you're looking for how governments are mitigating the impact so that in some countries the governments are able to better support their people, go back into their fiscals and their reserves and ask how much are these citizens contributing into the fiscal. What is the tax to GDP ratio in some of these countries? What is their reserve position? That empowers their governments to be able to make some of these interventions. Go back and look at policy. There are countries in which petroleum policy is not 100% deregulated like ours. I was talking to the market women who bring fruits and all food items from various parts of the country when we met them for the day 1 of the assessment. And they were saying, we go to Burkina Faso and bring food items, or to Wale Wale and bring fruits. And the loading boy in, loading boy out, plus transport, you add it all, and I can't charge anything less than this in the market unless you, government, you are willing to give me money. And the fuel people say, but we go to Rotterdam and bring fuel, bring it in, exchange rate, etc. If government is not able to give us money, then we also can't reduce fuel prices. And then you come to the government kitty and say, how much are we contributing into the government kitty? So yes, you may see that different countries are having different points of impact, particularly for countries that have stronger buffers than we do, countries that are contributing more into the fiscals to feed into the buffers. You will see that the impact is hitting them differently.
Okay.
And so this wishing away that, oh, they are blaming everything on Russia and Ukraine is not true.
And COVID.
It is actually not. Just look at the data from all over the world. It's hitting everybody. But yes, some governments are able to better respond because they have more buffers, they have more fiscal space, and so they're able to do that.
Okay.
We are
talking about rallying around the flag, you've been mentioning that, but at least over the period, the question I've seen many people put on our social media pages is, since when is going back to the IMF no longer is lazy government approach?
Well, there's a context to that conversation. In fact, I have an interview I granted to Asempa, which I've seen being circulated around. I wish you had it, where the presenter asked me a question that the Moody's report says that when the previous administration went to the fund, it brought discipline and it helped a recovery. Don't they deserve credit? And I respond by saying, what took us to the fund? If Moody's acknowledges that it was indiscipline, in fact, the administration of the day explained that they had chewed the meat down to the bone. It wasn't my words, those were their words. Moody's was more clinical. They said indiscipline. Which is self-induced. And then you have to go to the fund to support you or to bail you out. However, with the greatest of respect, I struggle to understand anybody who says that it is the same as when two crises hit the world and about half of the countries in the world go to the fund for support. The two are obviously not the same. They are not.
Okay. Well, we'll take some more questions on this, but the announcement for some is also more like a way of just, restoring investor confidence in the country, but not necessarily because we really want the fund to help us. Is that the case?
No.
Some have said you're just announcing it so that you can just restore investor confidence.
No. We are not playing a game of, just announcing our bonds have rallied, yes, admittedly, in the hours after the statement came out. We understand that quite clearly. But no, we are not playing that game of announcing just for bonds to rally and then to later, step away. We are quite clear. The president has been quite clear. He has ultimate responsibility. He's been quite clear that I want you to start engaging, tidy up the enhanced economic program, put it before the fund. Let's see how they can support us on the BOP side of this bigger program, and then let's go.
Well, speak of the president and how clear he is about this particular decision, and knowing that his finance minister had said earlier that this was not going to happen. You said that he has the ultimate responsibility. Is he happy with his finance minister? There have been calls for him to be sacked, for instance. Is he sticking with him?
We are in a democracy. You're going to get calls from various places about various things. What you do is you ask yourself, what are the key value drivers? There's a finance minister who from 2017 to 2019 leading the charge. We saw how the Ghanaian economy with its own challenges still delivered some numbers. There's a finance minister who, when we were hit by 2020, we saw how he was able to lead for us to rally, to get the necessary buffers in place to respond. We are now in 2020. He was pretty optimistic that we can still do it domestically. The domestic program has been challenged. I've explained to you the various challenges the domestic program has suffered. And contrary to his initial position, the boss takes a decision that this is what I want my administration to do. And has put together a task force to start working on it for it to happen. You may have those who say, yes, he should fire the finance minister. But go back to, for example, President Mills and Dr. Kwabena Dufo. Go back to President Mahama, who interestingly made this call a few days ago, and his finance minister at the time, my very good friend, Mrs. Sektekbe. The history will tell you that presidents have a lot of confidence in their finance ministers until you can prove otherwise. In our case, even the more. If you look at the work that our finance minister has led us to do in the first part before these pandemics hit us, it will not support that argument that because he was initially of the view that we can do this domestically, he should be fired. No, I don't think he'll support
So he
that.
still has the support of the president
That
and
is
the
my
party at large?
That is my understanding.
Okay. We are in a half year. We're expecting the mid-year budget.
Yeah.
Are we to expect new taxes?
You're going to go back to Parliament with, first of all, an assessment of how the fiscals have performed in the first year. I can tell you already, I think we are in excess of our deficit by about 6 billion. Revenue, underperformance, still you've got a lot of expenses to deal with. In between, you have debt servicing obligations that you have to deal with. Does that require a cutting of some expenditure items, a restructuring of our debt, new revenue handles, or more efficiency on the old revenue handles, or a mixture of all of these? This coming weekend, especially after the fund team gets into town and we go through the first round of talks, we'll have an opportunity to
They're coming in this week.
This week.
When was the first round starting?
This week.
When? Do we know exactly when?
This week.
Just this week. Okay.
But by the weekend, when the government sits a second time preparing for the half year, their input will be available, as will all the other data sets that we are looking for. And then we'll now begin to make some decisions for half year. So for half year, what mix of instruments are you looking at? But ultimately, what the president is interested in is that the hardship that Dr. Otu and Pastor Sumeni and Julius have been talking about, his government will be in a position where it can work to mitigate that hardship. So for all of these decisions, they are not ends in themselves. That's what it's supposed to translate into, and that's what will be animating his mind when we sit this weekend to look at the latest.
Is the road toll coming back?
Say again?
The road toll.
I don't have any indication on that. We're yet to even sit to look at all of those numbers, Emefa.
Okay. Let's get into the next batch of questions that you've sent in. And yeah, if you're ready, we'll get into it. And this one from Ajay. How will our decision to go for an IMF bailout affect the care program, for instance? Afi, government announced its own measures to deal with the problems faced by the economy. Will there be any significant difference between these measures and the IMF plan? We see continuous hikes in fuel prices, and government has come in to subsidize by suspending the price stabilization levy. Will our decision to go for an IMF bailout affect government giving out subsidies? Maxwell. Della says, are we likely to see more tax handles as a way of expanding the revenue net? Livingston says, nursing and teacher training allowance will be scrapped. That's for this batch of questions. So they are worried. Nursing and training allowance, will it be scrapped?
As I've mentioned, there's a whole raft of expenses that we would have to look at as we sit. It may not be a wise thing for me, even before we sit into those negotiations, to start, posturing on these ones. I think we should give ourselves the opportunity to look at that. So on the revenue side, on the expenditure side, on the debt side, the time is now coming for those negotiations to take place. What I can tell you is that the IMF is not a fan of subsidies of any kind. And you would have to make a very good case to hold on to any subsidies that you may have in your fiscal framework already. So it will be some set of difficult conversations there, but tough times call for tough people. We'll look to deal with those.
So some of the subsidies, we are hoping that it may not stay.
I haven't said that. I have said that you have to make a strong justification to hold on to them.
Is the finance minister still leading this whole,
the task force is chaired by the president, but the finance minister is an integral part of it. He's been authorized to start the engagement, but the final decisions will be made by the president himself in the chair.
Okay. So Dela was asking about tax handles as a way of expanding. We talked about whether we're expecting more.
I have mentioned that you have to examine whether you have to tighten some of them or introduce new ones, but it's all at large now. We're not going to.
How about the care program? Ajay is worried about that.
So that is what we have to understand. There was a CARES program to deal with coronavirus. This was in 2021. And then in 2022, we introduced the mitigation measures to top up what was happening in the CARES program. What we are doing now is an enhanced economic program that puts all of these two together in the face of the new challenges that we have.
Well, so I see more. I think some of them are just joining and are still asking what kind of deal will government be seeking at the IMF. I also see one, what is the state of talks between government and the fund? Have we initiated moves? Do we have a negotiation team in place already? And how difficult a decision was it finally now that we decided to seek an IMF support? How will this decision also fare ahead of the 2024 for the NPP? I'm sure he's talking about the elections. Yeah. Is this a nail in the coffin of the breaking of the 8th agenda?
So what kind of deal? The deal is to be negotiated and structured. It's early days yet. How difficult has it been for government to take this decision? I think it's obvious that it's not been an easy decision for government to take. You have key actors in government who have said that.
Is it difficult eating humble pie?
No, you have to take politically pragmatic decisions, and then you have to take decisions that are also in the best interest of the Republic. So you have different advisors, they come to the table with different views. If you are the president, you take ultimate responsibility and bring down the gavel on a particular decision point. But you can imagine the sort of, heated debates that would take place before a decision like this is reached. I think about 2024, and now I'm talking politics. What matters most to the people of Ghana is how you deliver on their interests. What do the people of Ghana want? What are the conditionalities, for example, that they fear? What you should focus on is how you structure your broader enhanced economic program and the components in the fiscal and the monetary that the IMF is going to help you out with, so that in the end you deliver to the satisfaction of the people. If you do that, and you are upfront with the people and explain that, I said I'll never go to the IMF because I believe that we have the competencies to run the Ghanaian economy. The evidence from 2017 to 2019 bears me out. 2020, we were hit. 2022, we were hit. And as a result of these two hits, when about half of the world was going to the fund for support, I went to the fund for support. It is not about my inability to manage the local economy.
This is not a goodbye to the Breaking the Eight agenda for the NPP?
No. And when I went to the fund and took their money to support my program, this and this and this is what I used it for, and that's how can I be able to deliver on your interest. You make that case to the people of Ghana. The people of Ghana are very discerning. And I believe that in the end, they will make a good decision.
Well, you've talked about the president being part of the task force. You've talked about the finance minister. Someone is asking. He's chairing it, yeah. So you've talked about that. I think there was a question about our team, our negotiation team. I know two now.
Well, you are trying to bait it out of me. I think that we will make that detail available as we go along. I can tell you for now that the president himself is in the chair. He's asked his finance minister and the finance team to start the first set of engagements. And maybe by the time the president speaks to the nation, by the end of the week, he will, I don't know, he may provide some more details on these ones. He will speak to the nation.
He will?
Oh, yes, he will speak to the nation.
Okay. Well, is it also fair to suggest that government has failed in the management of the economy?
That's I think I've just answered that already.
Okay. Well, and when you see videos, when he sees videos of him and other top government officials in the past criticizing the NDC for going to the IMF and literally say it's a sign of failure, how does he feel now?
But I've just explained it. In my instance, for example, I was asked a question and I answered that question clearly, that if you say that the NDC should be credited for going to the IMF, ask yourself what took them there. And if the NDC has admitted that it was because, these are not my words, these are their words, they chewed them in down to the bone. For example, the ratings agency says that it was indiscipline, and we have criticized for that. It is not the same as being hit by global crises of this magnitude that is sending about half of the world's countries to go and ask for resources. The two, as I've said over and over again, are not the same.
Okay. What is government willing to sacrifice as we go into this negotiation?
Well, you've got to look at what the other party is asking of you and look at what you can afford to cut off without having a significant impact on the quality of lives of your people. Already this year, government has cut expenses of government officials by about 30%. Salaries have been cut by about 30%. Ministries, departments, and agencies have had their budgets initially cut by 20% and then later some more. I think the half-year numbers will show us out. And the real sector division of the finance ministry is explaining that those cuts alone are affecting the level of growth that we are projected in the Ghanaian economy, because government is the single largest spender in the economy still. So as a government, you're asking yourself, what is the impact of this cut? And it is one of the things that will animate our minds. What is the impact generally on the economy, but more importantly on the individuals, people, like the people we've spoken to, Julius and Dr. Otu. And
Mohammed.
Yes. You want to ask, what is the impact of these cuts? And that's what, assists you in the kind of negotiation that you're doing.
Well, I'm told I have the last batch of questions that we'll get into, but amongst the things that we are hoping to leverage since we get into these talks, is e-levy one of the things that we are leveraging or going to the table with as we start our negotiations?
When you go to the fund, typically they will tell you to do better on revenue. We've already got a revenue measure which we believe over a period, when we plug the loopholes and we give it time, as all other revenue measures, to hit its optimal levels, we will be able to get some good resources from. I do not get any indication at this moment that it is something that we intend to take off the table. You want to put it all on the table. Put the modeling on the table, put the early numbers on the table, let us all interrogate it, and then we can make a decision that maybe we don't need to introduce any new revenue measures because we already have the semblance of it. We just need to give it time to grow and to plug in the necessary loopholes.
Okay, so as we wrap up, I know that earlier Eric Techi with NAPCO was supposed to join us with his thoughts. I'm told he's with us, but really, we all know what the concerns of NAPCO is. Since you're here, he's dying to hear from government on what exactly the plan is for them. NAPCO trainees, they've been on our neck, at our doors over the period on their situation.
Yeah, I mean, I think the government has been clear that for NAPCO persons, they're going to be rolled onto the You Start program, a program which is aimed at ensuring that they have capital and technical support to start up their own businesses. It's a matter of when the program is launched and how these resources are made available so that they can move forward. I feel the pain of the NAPCO beneficiaries, which has been occasioned by the limited resources in the national kitty. There are many times I go into my constituency and I have to pay for some of my NAPCO people who are helping in some of our hospitals and other places like that. We just may not make too much noise about it, but we feel their pain, and our expectation is that the You Start program will be rolled out shortly so that they can all be moved on to it.
Okay, well, so Eric Techi, you have a response there from the Information Minister on the NAPCO situation. I'm sure, I wonder if you are satisfied with it, but as and when we still try to engage, we'll get more answers for you. But in wrapping up, thankfully, we have just a few minutes to go, Mr. Minister. We are starting this week, you said. We are looking at a period of about, 6 months?
Usually, that's what it would take, usually.
But
we are
from the
hoping
books,
to cut it a bit more.
By how many months?
I don't know. It's a negotiation. You can't start off by drawing your own lines. You got to have a conversation that I know it takes maybe 6 to 9 months, but I want to do it in, 4 months or so. And then we say there's a work program, so can we fast track the provision of all of these data sets and the decision dates? Because you have to do it, get their country team, get the team that is working with you to agree. It has to go to board for board to be approved in Washington, etc. So it takes a while. You want to maybe fast track it, but it takes a while.
Have you seen the calls and the messages that Ghanaians are sending to the IMF?
Yes, I have. Ghanaians, every joke aside, we have a very peculiar way of dealing with things. I remember when we announced that some persons were plotting a coup and had actually gone to test, explosives at the beach. And I remember all the jokes and the cartoons, the kitchen coup challenge. Today, when people give evidence in court and videos are played and audio is played, then we realize that the situation was not actually a joke. So I understand some of these things. But I'm hopeful that as we go through the process and as we get what is in the best interest of the Ghanaian public, everybody would get to a point where we are.
Will it not affect negotiations in any way? Because it looks like a groundswell of them, a number of messages that people are sending for the fund not to give us what we are asking for. Will not affect anything?
There are 33 million Ghanaians. The fund is aware of that number. So if they see a certain number of messages, some of which you may even believe are coordinated on their platforms, I'm sure they're able to put it in perspective.
But some of these things, the government take it seriously when you see some of these messages, some of these tweets out there. At least they are supposed to be representing our nation, and they tend to go that way.
They will
represent
a view of a section of the Ghanaian public. And as I've mentioned to you, the views on this are mixed. And we are in a democracy. You must understand that people have views that differ from the views that you express, and there's nothing wrong with it.
Is government in control of our economy, you'd say?
Well, the numbers speak for themselves. 2017 to 2019, 2020, which was an exceptional period. And then when we started bouncing back in 2021 and put in place a program for 2022, when we saw the signals in February, that's why in March we introduced these mitigation measures. We have been assessing in the last 1 week, and we have said that we don't want the situation to deteriorate. And so we're going to go for balance of payment support to help us on this part while we do the rest. I think that is a sign of an administration that has got its eye on the ball.
Are you blaming the ordinary Ghanaian for where we are today because we did not pay e-levy?
No.
At least we've heard others say so.
No. I have told you earlier that there's a global crisis that is hitting us.
Okay.
And we've had our internal challenges that that have not allowed us to get our economic program through. What is more important is how we rally around the red, gold, green to solve the challenges that we have.
Okay, we are grateful. That's Ghana's Information Minister, Kojo Oppong Nkrumah, joining us for tonight's edition of The Probe. We have a repeat tomorrow evening at 6 p.m. right here on this channel. I am Emefa Apawu. Another edition comes your way same time on Sunday. Have a good evening. There's more news when you log on to myjoyonline.com. Many thanks for your company.